Okay, so we are continuing our discussion on the sociology of identity by looking at additional terms associated with this concept. In the previous discussion, we looked at very key terms that capture the essence of identity, and those terms are very critical to understanding what identity really means and the different types of identity. In this one, we're going to continue that discussion and look at additional terms that are also very, very critical and speak to the core of the sociology of identity. All right, let's take a look. Next slide. So now you were looking at looking glass self, and the name is a very interesting one, looking glass self. Now take a look at this. So we're talking about looking, we'll talk about glass, and we'll talk about self, right? Looking glass self. So this theory then says that our ideas about who we are, and that's the identity right here, our ideas of who we are formed through the way we, very key word here, so please take note, we imagine we are being seen by others, right? So we and others, right? So we, the way we imagine ourselves being seen by others, and that imagination forms our identity, right? So in this case, our identity is being shaped by others, right? So the others is very important here because this is the agent. This is the agent of socialization in this case, right? So the agent that influences who we are in society. So, for example, people see you as an intelligent person. Well, you begin to believe that. You begin to believe that you're intelligent, and that becomes that you begin to assume that, and you begin to see that as your own identity. What others think about you. If they think that you are too confident of yourself, you have a high self-esteem, you are outgoing and so forth, you begin to think that of yourself, and you begin to tell people that that's part of your identity, right? Because you believe in what people say about you, you believe in the perception of people about you. Right? And that's what looking glass self means. The theory that our ideas about our identity are formed through the way we imagine people see us. So we are imagining that this is how people see us, and that imagination comes from interaction with these people. Right, interaction with these people, and in the process of interaction, they tell you that this is what we think about you. And then, of course, you go off believing that. It's another example of where the individual has no control over the process, because you don't control what people think about you. Nobody controls what people think about them. That's why oftentimes they say, well, don't worry about what people think, because people are always going to think about something positive or negative about everyone else. So you can't be worried about what everybody thinks about you. And that's why you don't have control over it. Right? And that's why you don't have control over it. So another example of the main person has no control over that process. And you're being influenced by others. The views of others influence the way you see yourself. Next slide. Okay, so now this one is a front stage behavior. As the name suggests, front stage behavior, and it's an interesting framework because this is saying that according to the dramaturgical approach, right, the behavior that we exhibit when in public or around less familiar acquaintances. Now, this is a very interesting one because people behave nicely for the most part. Right, when they are in the midst of others, they come to work and they say good morning to everybody. They are going out for lunch. They say, "Oh, you want to join me for lunch?" Or they're going for coffee. They say, "Oh, you want a cup of coffee?" To their co-workers and so forth. That's what is called front stage behavior. Guess what? Some of these people don't do that at home. They don't say good morning to their family members. They just wake up, brush their teeth, take a shower, and walk out of the house. They don't do that. And some, I'm talking about some, obviously not everyone, but some don't do that, right? And some don't, when they're going for coffee, they don't ask their family members, hey, do you want a cup of coffee? They don't do that because they're in familiar setting, right? They're in familiar setting with people they know, and they take advantage of those people because sometimes it's often said that familiarity breeds contempt. And that's what is happening here. Right? But with front stage behavior, they behave nicely. If they bop, for example, they say, excuse me. But if they bop at home, they don't say, excuse me to the people around them. Right? Just things like that. It's in the subconsciousness of individuals that they have to behave a certain way in public. That is what is called the front stage behavior. And this is why employers don't go through the interview process. Some employers don't go through the interview process because they say the candidates exhibit front stage behavior during the interview. They do everything nice. They dress well. They smile for 2-3 hours. They say they shake hands well, and they say all the nice things, all the right words. But is that who they really are? Is that who they really are? Anyone can pretend for 2 hours to get a job, and that is the challenge here. So front stage behavior is the behavior that we exhibit in public or around less familiar acquaintances, the people who don't know. Because according to the research, that's not who, for most people, that's not who they are. That's not who they are. They're just trying to be nice. They're just trying to be courteous. They're just trying to exercise some decorum. But that's not who they really are. Who they are is the next slide, which is the backstage behavior. So let's take a look. Okay, so the backstage behavior then is the opposite of the front stage behavior. According to the dramaturgical approach, the behavior that we exhibit only when we are alone, right, or around more intimate acquaintances. So when we are alone, we feel free to do certain things, and we are relaxed, and there's no pressure anywhere and so forth. Or when we're with family and friends, people that are close to us, people that know us very well, we let our guards down, right? That's the real person. That's the real person. Let our guard down, and do certain things that we wouldn't do in public. So, and that is called the backstage behavior. And researchers believe that individuals' behavior, the identity of individuals, is really captured here in this backstage behavior. That's the real person, according to research. So the behavior that we exhibit when we're alone and when we are with people that we know very well, right? We're around more intimate acquaintances we know very well. And we behave naturally, so to speak. And that's backstage behavior. Next slide. All right, so here we are talking about intersectionality, which is a very interesting word. Intersectionality it's a concept that talks about this intersection. So let's take a look at it this way, right? It's a concept by the way, let's give credit. Kimberly Crenshaw is the one that came up with this concept. Crenshaw is the one that came up with this concept of intersectionality. And in this concept then, she is saying that we have, and everybody has, what we call intersection of identity, right? Intersection of identity. So here you have race as an identity, and here you have religion as an identity, and here you have nationality as an identity as well. And here you have sex as an identity, right? So all of these are identity of one person. So for example, the person may be a black gentleman. The person may be a man. I did say gentleman here, so obviously a man. And the person may be, say, let's say a Christian, and the person a Christian, and the person may be, let's say here, a South African. Okay, all right. So here then you have the identities of race, identity of sex, being a man, identity of religion, being a Christian, and identity of nationality, being a South African, intersecting. They all come, this is the intersection right here. They all come to this intersection, right? Intersection. And sometimes they become the basis for discrimination. Please take note. Very important point here. Sometimes these identities become the basis for discrimination. So they're discriminating against the person because the person is black. They're discriminating against the person because the person is male, right? So the racial profiling of black men. They discriminate against the person because the person is Christian, and they discriminate against the person because the person is a South African. All of these identities converge and become basis for discrimination. Now, this is really tough. And that's what we mean by intersectionality of identity, right? Identities come together, and those identities become basis for discrimination. So take a look at this closely. So race is a basis for discrimination alone. Man, depending on where you are, is a basis for stereotyping, gender discrimination, profiling. Religion, depending on where you are, is a basis for discrimination as well. And nationality is a basis for discrimination as well. So each one of these identities alone, standing alone, right, each one is a basis for discrimination. And if you bring all four together, then that means that person is being discriminated against 4 times over, right? 4 times over. And that's the intersectionality of identity. That sometimes could be very, very challenging for a lot of people in our society, because everyone has multiple identities. Everyone has multiple identities on the basis of race, on the basis of religion, on the basis of nationality, on the basis of sex, on the basis of education class, in terms of a socioeconomic class, and the list goes on. Everyone has that. And we have to be very careful and have to be very mindful of this as well, because all of these are forms of identity as well. And those identities become the basis for discrimination. Next slide. Okay, so here we talk about cultural assimilation, which is also a very important point to note when we talk about identity, because here we are talking about cultural assimilation, which means that all members of society should conform to one culture. And this is loss of identity. When that happens, the minority group usually loses their identity, because they are the ones being assimilated into the majority group. So here it says dominant group, right? They are the ones being assimilated into the dominant group. And that assimilation, that means they lose their own identity. It's very important for us to understand this in this whole concept of identity. We talk about identity, it's not only about how people identify you, it's also about how you lose your identity as well in society. And this is one way of doing that. Cultural assimilation. So minorities in a society are expected to speak the dominant language. They are expected to celebrate the holidays of the dominant language. For example, if there's a holiday and the shops are closed, well, you have no choice but stay at home. You cannot go to the shops. You cannot go to downtown. All the offices are closed, and so forth. So somehow you are forced to observe that holiday in one way or the other. And the minority group then, in the process, lose their identity, lose their culture, lose their tradition, because they are being assimilated into the majority group. And one way of doing that is for them to be speaking the language, right? If you go to a new country, you speak the language of that country. It's not the other way around. You speak the language of that country, and that's cultural assimilation, because you cannot get around without understanding language. You may not be able to get a job, you may not be able to go to school, interact freely, and so forth. So you're forced to speak that language. And in the process of doing that, you are gradually losing your identity. Especially if you don't have a community that comes from your country of origin and so forth. If you don't have a community around you, especially where you can speak the language and still be involved in the customs and traditions and culture and so forth, well, you're going to be losing your own identity very slowly. You're losing your identity. You're not speaking your language. You're not observing your culture, your customs, and you're speaking a different language. You're observing different norms and nuances, etc. That's cultural assimilation. So we have many examples of cultural assimilation societies that demand, for example, that everyone speaks the same language in that society, everything be printed in one language, the medium of instruction should be in that language, and businesses should conduct business in that language, etc. That is cultural assimilation. And please take note that when that happens, you lose your culture because you've been absorbed into the dominant group. Next slide. So social and cultural integration is the opposite of cultural assimilation. Please take note. It's the opposite of cultural assimilation, right? So here we are saying that rather than assimilating, right, and be lost in that process, and again, when we talk about assimilation, you want to think about it this way. You have in a bowl orange juice, 80% of the bowl is filled with orange juice, 20% of the bowl is filled with apple juice, right? And you mix it up, and then taste it. You're going to be tasting orange juice. Essentially, you're going to be tasting orange juice because 80% of the bowl is made of orange juice, 4 times more than apple juice, right? And that's cultural assimilation. But here we're saying social cultural integration. Even though minorities are with the dominant group, they are allowed to assume their identity, right? This is key. Allowed to assume that their identity and individualism is encouraged. Encouraging individualism because of the belief that when people are individuals, the society is stronger because they have not lost their identity. And this is a crucial point. They have not lost their identity. They still maintain their identity. They're speaking their language. They're eating their food. They're dressing the way they dress at home. They are with their community members and so forth, etc. The belief then is these are strong individuals who have a center and have an understanding of both cultures, their culture and the new culture, the Canadian culture, etc. And according to this concept, that makes society stronger because they're individuals and they're maintaining their identity while embracing the identity of the majority group as well, right? While understanding all that. That's cultural integration. The social cultural integration, right? Maintaining your identity, maintaining your individualism while still with the dominant group. So you're integrating. So one example would be relationship here between two people. One person is from one ethnicity, the other person is from another ethnicity, right? So they are still from two different ethnicities, but they are together learning about each other's ethnicity, right? That is integration. They're integrating, they're, checking out the food, checking out the clothing, checking out the music, checking out the tradition and so forth, understanding all that, being involved in that and so forth, but still maintaining their own individualism and their own culture. That's cultural integration. Next slide. Okay, so here we're talking about ethnicity. I want to ask the question: what is ethnicity? Right? We talked about race in part 1. So the question here is, what is ethnicity? Now, it's important for us to understand ethnicity because it plays a key role in identity, right? So race plays a key role. Ethnicity, and these are essentialism, right? Because we can't change race, we can't change ethnicity. Ethnicity, right, plays a key role as well. Now the question is, what is it? A group of people that share the same or similar cultural characteristics and have the same or similar ancestry. That's ethnicity, right? So people that have these commonalities, right, they may be in different parts of the world. There may be different parts of the world. For example, you have black people in Jamaica, you have black people in Trinidad, you have black people in Dominican Republic, in Haiti, in Cuba, and so forth. And you have black people in Africa. Now the question is, do they have the same ethnicity? And do they share the same cultural characteristics? Their culture is very similar to that of Africans, right? Their culture is very similar to that of Africans. And so it can be said that yes, they're of the same ethnicity, because they share a common ancestry, which is African, common ancestry. coming from Africa, and the cultural practices are similar. Now, they don't have to be exactly the same because of the environmental differences and the influx of people from other parts of the world into those spaces, intermingling and so forth. So the culture may be different a little bit, but the core is there. You can see the core. So ethnicity is very important for us to understand as well within the larger context of globalization and immigration to different parts of the world of the same type of people adhering to similar culture and having the same ancestry. And this is another form of identity as well. And this is why one person can identify with the other person even though they are not from the same country, but having the same ancestry and sharing similar cultures. Okay, next slide. Okay, so in this discussion then, we've looked at these terminologies. We looked at looking glass self, how your identity is determined by how others perceive you. We looked at the front stage behavior, where you behave differently, usually in a more civilized manner, in a more courteous manner, in a more acceptable manner when you are with people that you don't know very well. For example, in the office, in the classroom, on the plane, you're traveling, at the airport, in public places. Front stage behavior. Backstage behavior is the opposite. You're with people you know and you let your guard down, and that's your true self. That's the true identity right there. The backstage behavior. Intersectionality, where different identities of one person come together to form basis of oppression. Right? Now, it doesn't always have to be oppression, but for the most part, that's the result. These identities come together and form basis of oppression. Now, some of these identities, standing alone, form basis for oppression as well, all by themselves. But when you bring all four together, then you have more of that. Cultural assimilation, right? The minority group assimilating to the majority group and losing their identity in the process. And social integration, then the opposite. You're with other groups, but you're not being absorbed into those groups. You're maintaining your culture, you're maintaining your individualism, you're appreciating the other people's culture, but you're not all, taken in, as in the case of cultural assimilation. And finally, we looked at ethnicity and trying to understand the dynamism of ethnicity, cultural similarity amongst people sharing the same ancestry, etc. And that's another form of identity that identifies in people in society through their culture, through their ancestry, and who they are. Okay, so hopefully this is helpful and gives you a good insight into the sociology of identity and how society uses identity for the various purposes, mostly political purposes.